Okay, good morning, everyone. Calling to order the April 29th, 2026 meeting of the Marin County Employees Retirement Association Governance Committee. Mr. Administrator, can you call the roll, please?
Trustee Cooper. Here. Trustee Hellwig.
Yeah.
Trustee Silverstein.
Here.
Trustee Jones is not here. So, Mr. Chair, everyone, the committee members are all present except for Trustee Jones.
The first item here is to consider the minutes of our previous meeting, the October 22nd meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those minutes? And if so, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
So moved.
So,
Second.
okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes as written of the October 22nd meeting. Take a vote. Any discussion? No discussion, so can we have
All in favor?
Yeah, all in favor? Raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, the motion to adopt the October 22nd, 2025 minutes passes unanimously 3-0. Trustee Jones absent.
Okay, do we have any members of the public who wish to address us at this point? Okay, no public comment. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda is to consider the reports of voting our proxies at the various shareholder meetings that happened in the last quarter of last year and the first quarter of this year.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, you have the proxy voting reports from your managers for the period through March 31st, 2026. And that is item 1A. And so staff have been through the reports, nothing of note to raise the committee, but usually this is an open item for your discussion if there's anything that you may have observed in the votes yourself.
So yes, so I once again want to thank the staff for preparing these reports. I noticed we now have the Fidelity report in alphabetical order, which I appreciate very much. Some of the ones from State Street where we do our the voting is done according to our specific policy, gives the reasons when we vote against management. And it's very interesting and useful to see that and see our policies being implemented there. Some of the others, like the Fidelity one, does not give the reasons when they vote against management. And I'm just wondering if we could ask them to include the reasons in the next report to make it consistent with the others. KBI also does not include the reasons, but it's pretty obvious. I think why they are voting against management when they do so. Maybe they could also include the reasons in there. So that's my observation. I'm glad to see that our policies are being implemented well. The ones where ISS is doing the voting, applying our policies, and KBI which has a slight variation in its policy, is pretty much the same as ours. And I noticed the consistency there, and I appreciate all that. So those are my observations. We are, we have a very rigorous policy on executive compensation. So we are voting against a decent number of these extremely high executive compensation ones, and it's just good to see all that happen. Any other comments from my fellow trustees and committee members on this?
Mr. Chair, we will follow up with both of the managers that you mentioned about adding the additional information to their voting reports.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the governance risk report, and
Well, before you go on, I know you combined some of that, but just to note, 1B, which is also the reports on executive compensation. Those reports are in there. And to follow up on your note, there's also the summary report that we included from ISS that summarizes the votes for and against using our policy. And if you were to look on that report, you see that we're voting for 37% of the time and against 57% of the time. So just to follow up on your comment about the policy of voting, but the details are also in of how that is working out and how those votes occurred are in the report under 1B.
Yes, that is correct.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, now you can move on to the governance risk report.
Yes. So let's, are we going to do
So
that?
we'll bring in Jeff Burden from ISS to cover the governance risk reports for quarter ending the fourth quarter 2025 and then the first quarter of 2026.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, committee members. I'm happy to be back again. Thank you for having me. We will cover the reports for Q4 2025 and Q1 2026. Can I please confirm everyone can see my screen here?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, great. So Q4 and Q1, as always, have a very small amount of meetings. The vast majority of your shareholder votes occur for meetings happening in Q2, but we did see some interesting meetings over the past 6 months, and I'll highlight a few for the committee. Okay, so before moving on, I'll just, as a reminder, state that we are looking at these 4 managers, but as you know, the votes covering your holdings managed by State Street and Dimensional are now voted by Marin County under the Marin County custom policy here at ISS. Okay, moving on to page 2 of the Q4 report. Okay, this is the section of the report where we look at the companies that held meetings during Q4 that scored poorly in our quality score metric that measures basically governance practices relative to their market. Couple of big names here for Q4. Obviously, Tesla, that was probably the most high-profile meeting held in Q4 for American firms. At the meeting, there was a very large performance-based stock award that was up for vote. It was basically going to give Elon Musk another share award with an ultimate value of millions of dollars if all hurdles are met. Sarah, per its policy, did vote against that award as well as the executive compensation plan and the broader stock plan at Tesla. The proposals did ultimately pass in part due to insiders' large holdings of shares at the company, but there was significant dissent from outside shareholders. Another notable name here, Oracle. We see this hit the report every Q4. In our view, the company has very poor compensation practices and shareholder rights. Again, as in past years, Sarah did vote against the pay package at Oracle this year. And before I move on, just as a reminder, the position value on this chart will reflect any pooled vehicles that you're invested in with your outside managers. So it does not necessarily reflect the value of MCERA's holdings in these companies. Okay, moving on to page 3 of the Q4 report. Again, very small number of meetings. All your managers did vote at 100% of the meetings to be voted. Another thing I'd note here, during Q4 for the meetings voted under the Marin County policy, 42% of votes were against management. That's a little higher than we typically see. I think that's a bit of an outlier based on the circumstances of the relatively few number of uh, meetings to be voted during Q4. I think typically you'll see that number be a bit lower than 42%. Moving on to page 4. Again, 215 meetings, pretty small number compared to what you'll see in Q2. Again, about 150 votes where you voted against management at least one time, pretty typical. I'll move on to page 5, where we break down your voting by proposal categories. Looking at the bottom of the page, where we look at shareholder proposals, there were not too many shareholder proposals, but there were some notable ones, in particular at the Microsoft meeting, where there were a few proposals related to AI. I think we can expect to see several more proposals this year directed at the large tech firms, where there will be an assortment of requests by shareholder activists looking for companies to disclose more information about their AI practices or how they use AI. Um, at the at the Microsoft meeting, Marin County supported 2 such AI-related proposals. Also notable at the Microsoft meeting, 2 shareholder proposals related to human rights received over 25 support, which is relatively high for such proposals. Then moving on to page 6, where we look at any contests voted during the quarter. You'll see in Q4 there was only one contest voted. It was at UniFirst Corporation. In this case, the contestant, the dissident shareholder, lost, but it was really only due to increased voting power by the insider shareholders. Basically, what we've seen at other firms like Alphabet and Meta, the insiders have super voting rights, basically more votes per share than the outside shareholders do. And due to that, they were able to overcome this proxy contest. So kind of an interesting contest. Typically, you wouldn't see that. Okay, unless there are any questions on Q4, I can move on to Q1. Okay, looking at Q1 on page 2. Again, a listing of companies that held meetings during Q1 that's scored poorly in our quality score assessment. At top of the list is Larsen and Toubro Limited. I'll just mention them because they're actually, well, not a big name in the US. They're a huge conglomerate in India. And I think they span many businesses, including defense contracting. The CEO of Larsen and Toubro made headlines last year for stating that he thought their employees should work 7 days a week, so to better compete with their Chinese competitors. It caused a big outcry in India amidst concerns about workers' rights, work-life balance, and such. Unrelated though, we found that they have poor board structure, poor compensation practices compared to other Indian firms. Another name to hit the list, bottom of the list here, Tyson Foods. It is a company that also has a super voting rights for the insiders. Um, so it always gets poor scores across the board, as you can see. Um, and that'll come up later in the report. It had some notable shareholder proposals this year. Moving on to page 3 of the Q1 report. Not too much to note here. Again, all your managers voted 100% of the meetings to be voted. You see that Marin County's total number of votes against management ticked down a bit for Q1. Looking at page 4, the Q1 number of total meetings voted, 243. Similar to what we've seen in other Q1s. I'll move on to the proposal category breakdown. Notably, you voted at about 50% support of management with executive compensation proposals. I think that's kind of similar to what we've seen, but just wanted to highlight that the Marin County policy towards executive compensation is relatively, I think it's doing what you want. It is calling out management practices that are um, outliers, I would say. Um, Looking at the bottom half, shareholder proposals. Not too many interesting ones in Q2. I will raise one that happened at Tyson again. There was a proposal by outside shareholders to ask Tyson to release their vote results in a manner that showed what the result would have been if not for the super voting power held by insiders, just mentioned a moment ago. So in cases where a proposal would have won, if not for the increased voting power of the insiders, they would want the company to, disclose such in their SEC filing, even if it had no impact. That received very significant support of outside shareholders. It did not ultimately pass, of course, due to the super voting power held by insiders, but it's an interesting kind of commentary by shareholder activists trying to highlight what they view as an unfair voting structure at the company. Okay, and then moving on to page 6 of the Q1 report. There was one proxy contest voted. It was a proposed merger by Star Surgical to be acquired by a firm, foreign firm Alcon. It was delayed several months as the company's largest shareholder opposed the merger. Ultimately, Star Surgical had to call off the merger as it could not gain majority support. Somewhat unusual occurrence, but was evidence of a shareholder able to avert management call to sell the company. And that is it for Q4 and Q1. Again, we'll have more to discuss when we cover Q2 of this year. Do you have any questions on what we've covered?
No, that was very good and very thorough. Thank you very much. From any questions?
So I just want to follow up on one item that Jack mentioned that, and this is on the governance risk report where they're showing the fund value, and that's not particularly the value that we hold within that, but within your reports, I always include reports that show the individual fund values. So I just want, we could bring up those pages for the quarter end, the fourth quarter, 2025. That's page 280 of the PDF. And so these are all the corresponding managers that are listed in the governance risk report with the values, market values that we had within these funds. And then likewise, if we go to the next page, 281, this is the one company where there was the contested vote. And this is the market value that we had in the company that held that share. So it was DFA, your small cap core, and the value of that. And then for the quarter ending March 31st, 2026, same thing, page 289 of that report of the packet shows all the reports that are listed in the governance risk report, and then the managers and which one of your managers hold those, so that you see that detail of which one of the managers that we have holds that, and then those values, and the same then with the page 290 of the PDF of the governance risk report for the contested manager. So just wanted to follow up that you do have the details about who are the managers, your managers, that are holding these, and what is the value within the fund as of a certain date.
Yes, very,
Thank you.
very good and very useful. Thank you for doing that. Any other comments? So then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to consider new policies that the staff has prepared for us to discuss and possibly modify or adopt.
Yeah, so just kick this off, and Anya will start with the very first one. So we're proposing 4 new policies. We've got some specific items for a couple of them, but 2 of them are distinctly new, and those are items 3A and 3D. So let Anya take the first item, which is the electronic signature policy, which would be a new policy.
Good morning, trustees. So what you have in front of you is the electronic signature policy. Currently, we do not accept documents that allow electronic signature process. Current law, as outlined in the policy, already allows for that, so this policy will formalize the process. We intentionally do not mention the vendor that we will select for this process, and it's twofold. One, that we haven't begun that process. And 2, once we select the vendor, if we decide to change later, we do not want to come back and update the policy again. The policy asks for delegation of authority to select that vendor to retirement administrator. Most reputable vendors out there that offer that process already meet the criteria that are outlined in the policy. But again, if the board adopts, the committee recommends the adoption, and the board adopts the policy, we will begin that process at that time. Primarily why we would like to move forward with this policy is for convenience and better customer service to allow members to use electronic signatures. For the forms, we have also did not include which forms will be eligible for those signatures. We will do a phased approach, starting with the forms that are not as risky, and moving later to the forms that a little bit have more potential for risk, such as change of direct deposit. And if you have any questions, I think it's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
You covered it well. And the question is the criteria. Are they solely outlined in the policy, or using industry standard, or?
So the 3 criteria that are listed, the code mentions that the signature must meet the criteria of integrity, security, authenticity. It does not spell out specifically what's included. So with the help of counsel, we gave a little bit more explanation of what is included in the criteria, the description of it. But we also put the caveat that with the change in technology, we can determine whether the specific process will meet the criteria in accordance with the law.
Okay. Yeah, I know much bigger institutions, everybody's using it. And I would assume that there is some kind of industry standard that classify those, at least from the government or somebody else.
Yes. And we will work with Lineage Secure when we're going to be selecting the vendor to make sure it meets the criteria.
Yeah, I think it's good to get started with this and to go gradually with the less risky
Processes.
processes first. So everyone is sort of moving in this direction, and glad to see us doing that
Yeah,
as well.
this is great because we don't want to live in the past if we were.
No, and I would add that we benefited from researching the other SERLs who are doing this. So there are other county retirement systems that are doing this, and we benefited from researching what they were doing and how they were doing that when we developed the policy. So we're not the first one, and we don't want to be the last.
Any other comments from trustees? If so, I'll entertain a motion to adopt or.
I move to adopt.
To recommend to the board to adopt. So this committee can't adopt it. You need to
Okay,
recommend.
so we're gonna do them one by one.
Yes.
Yes,
So as council pointed out, the motion is to recommend that the board adopt the policy.
right. And
Correct.
and then we'll have a fuller discussion at the board meeting.
Or not.
or-
This is where you're supposed to have the full
Yeah.
discussion, but you can have more discussion.
Yeah,
than
with
we
two
should.
bites
Okay.
at the
Yeah.
end, which is a good policy.
Okay, so I move to adopt I move to recommend to the full board to adopt this policy.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, the motion to adopt recommend that the board adopt the electronic signature policy passes unanimously 4-0.
Okay, so the next policy to consider is the delegation and oversight policy.
So the next two are new policies, but they are based on existing information that we already have. So the first one, and you have a memo from me on this, is the delegation and oversight policy. So the board throughout the last number of years has in different situations delegated certain levels of authority to the retirement administrator. They have not been done through policies, though. They were done through resolutions, which is in function the same as a policy. It's the board saying that we agree that this should happen. So what we have done is to take those 4 resolutions and to put them into a policy. So we haven't really, there isn't anything that expands the authority of the administrator within this policy. It is strictly just bringing them all into a policy so that they can then be reviewed on a regular schedule in front of this board. That's one of the challenges that we saw from a governance standpoint, is that the resolutions don't have a regular schedule. It would just be if you had a question on them. Whereas the policy will be assigned a schedule for you to take a review of it and see if there are any changes that you want to make. So there's nothing, there's no substantive change to the authorities. It is bringing them into a place where they will be more visible and more regularly reviewed.
New format.
New format, but I think once again, giving them better visibility for the full board. Because unless you were here in 2010 and 2011, you didn't know that you had delegated certain authorities to the administrator to do certain things, or 2016. So these things haven't been reviewed since that date, since those period of time.
It just regularizes the procedure here.
It does, and I'm not suggesting any changes to the authorities either. But I think what this does is, as this comes back to you, then you can then discuss more fully, look, are you comfortable with that? Have circumstances changed that you want to update or change that? But for right now, what we're just trying to do is make this a more standard part of your business that receives board review on a regular basis.
All right, any questions or comments?
Not me.
I'll make a motion to recommend the adoption by the board of the new delegation and oversight policy.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend to the board to adopt this. Any further discussion? All right, let's have a vote. Everybody in favor, raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, the motion to adopt the delegation and oversight policy passes unanimously. Recommend the board adopt the delegation and oversight policy passes unanimously 4-0.
Okay, moving on to the next one, which is the disability retirement policy and all the procedures
So
involved
there,
therein.
yes, Mr. Chair. So there are a number of moving pieces with this one that I want to describe. First, you have had other policies with procedures around disability, retirement applications, and disability retirement death applications. So you have existing policies for that. But you also, in your bylaws, which we're going to get to here in a moment, in your bylaws, have descriptions about disability processing. What we wanted to do is to pull that information out of the bylaws and then combine that with your existing policies. So once again, similar to the last one, is that you have one place that describes all of what you do from a disability retirement application processing or disability death retirement application processing, and it gets a regular review schedule, as opposed to something that's in your bylaws that you're not necessarily reviewing on a regular basis. So this is pulling from two different sources. It's pulling things out of your bylaws and putting it into a policy, and it's taking things from your other policies and adding it to this policy. In doing the work that was done, because it has been a while since the bylaws that deal with disability have been looked at, there were changes that we needed to make to the information that came from the bylaws. In particular, specifically, the area that talks about administrative hearings, because as you'll recall, for the way you handle disabilities is there's an application. The board does an initial consideration of that application where you then make a decision, grant, deny, refer. But based on your decision, the applicant may have the choice to appeal that decision to an administrative law judge. That process and how that works had not been updated within the bylaws. It was there, but it wasn't up to date. So we did make changes in that area to try to make sure that it captured exactly how administrative hearings work, how the timing for administrative hearings work, what happens when it comes back to the board. So we didn't make any changes to what you're doing. It mirrors the process that you've been following, but we did update the language from the bylaws that's included in this policy to make sure it's current. So that's the only real place where we made some, what I would say, any particular substantive changes. Certainly open it up because there's a ton of work that went into this to council if she wants to add anything about pulling these two things together. But the goal, once again, was to get everything into a single policy that you can manage, control, review on a regular basis, as opposed to having a policy and procedure and bylaws that are overlapping each other.
That's all correct. I'd say it's a big benefit for the board to have this in one place. It's
Yes.
also a benefit for members who are applying, for members, attorneys who are trying to see what the process is, just for purposes of regular review. There are a tremendous number of advantages to now having what's commonly known among the SERL systems as DRPs, disability retirement procedures, that are just all in one place.
Usually the same effects if rules exist in a policy or in a bylaw. Legally, they bear the same effect.
Well,
same-
yeah, that's a good question. We'll get to that a little bit more deeply in the next, when we get to the bylaws. The
Okay.
bylaws, as you'll see through the discussion of the history of that document, come before the Board of Retirement for adoption and then the Board of Supervisors for approval. And so, as you'll see when we get to that item, the proposal is to pull the disability retirement aspects of the bylaws out of the bylaws and put them here so that, again, the administrator of the plan, is able to manage that aspect of your very important aspect of your business in a way that doesn't require continuing to go back to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, that was my next question. So the bylaws can be changed. It needs a board of
Well,
supervisors.
that's a question that's brought, but the 37 Act says that, and the question is whether it's discretionary, ministerial, et cetera. So that's a much more difficult question to answer with a single word. But this is an approach to it addressing that dynamic in a way that is just solidifying current practices and putting documents where they should be in terms of who has the authority to modify them over time.
I think that what we're trying to, is that disability retirement processing is under the purview of the Board of Retirement, right? So it's in your bylaws, that's fine. Many people had it in your bylaws, but it makes it much more clunky to try to change those things constantly because it's going to be a two-step process. You adopt it, you send it to the Board of Supervisors. They may ask why they're seeing it at all. You know, when it could be viewed as strictly ministerial. So this just takes it out of that process and puts it where we think it belongs, which is in Board of Retirement policy.
Right?
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Okay, so I move to recommend to the full board to adopt the disability retirement policy and procedures.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We will proceed to a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Chair, the motion to recommend that the board adopt the disability retirement policy and procedure passes unanimously 4-0.
And moving on to the next new policy about payment of retiree benefits during the month of death.
So Anya will handle this. I'll just lead it in. This is a brand new policy. So this doesn't exist anywhere else. It is a process that we have to manage. And what we're trying to do with this policy is create more flexibility in how we manage it.
Thank you. As Jeff mentioned, this is a new policy. We have looked at the process for quite some time and coming to you, hopefully to recommend the adoption of this policy. A little bit of the background on how it works right now is when the retiree passes away during the month, we prorate that benefit. And a lot of times what happens is we already process the payroll and we don't find out in time that the person passed away. So the check for that month went out. But currently what we do, we calculate the prorated amount for the time that the person was alive. And then we request the remainder of the month from the state, from the beneficiary. And we have to send the letter, collect the money, receive the check, deposit, make the transaction. So it's a lot of steps, a lot of follow-up. And what we're proposing to change is that with that policy as it states is that the retiree has earned the full month of benefit payment if they were alive during the month. So we will eliminate the process of proration. If the person was alive during the month, the person was entitled to full month benefit, or portion of that will be paid to their beneficiary. A lot of times also what happens is if there is continuance, we prorate the amount, collect the money, turn around and pay the same amount for the beneficiary. So that's duplicative and unnecessary. We also consulted with the actuary, with Chiron, and confirmed with them that they already assume that the person earned full month benefit and it's already included in the valuation. So they don't anticipate any impact to the valuation results with the change.
And that's really, so this proration process, that happens whether the person died on the first day after the pay date or the second to last day. We're going back and prorating and taking it and then trying to repay them the amount that they, and I don't want to say that this is about something being administratively burdensome. This is about, does the fact that we assume the person earns it create a actuarial cost to the plan? And the answer is it doesn't, because the actuary already assumes they earned it for the full month. So we're going through, we are expending a lot of administrative time. Also, what is a difficult time probably for the family members of the individual retiree to try to recover generally smaller amounts of money.
Makes
Do we know how other plans 30?
Yeah, a lot of them follow that, where they will pay the full month and don't prorate.
A lot, majority, or?
I think the majority of CERLs do this and have moved towards this because once again, it is difficult from an administrative standpoint and it's not creating a cost impact because the actuaries assume the full cost and the benefit. There are still some that do it, and we can get that information and say, to give you some specifics on that.
And our view from the legality perspective is that there is it's not entirely clear from the statute that one is a better approach than the other, but from a rights perspective of members, they've already rendered all of their service. So there's no more or less service that's rendered as a result of this. The question is to whom the money is paid. So for an administrative interpretation that's being proposed here, for all of the reasons that the administrator and assistant administrator noted, it's perfectly reasonable. What was done previously to prorate was not wrong as a matter of law. This is not an error correction. And what's being proposed to go forward is not, is reasonable interpretation of the code in our assessment.
But also, I think an important point was the last point that Anya made about continuances. So anybody who has a surviving, first of all, almost 90% of our retirees take the unmodified option, which provides an automatic 60% survivor option to the surviving spouse. So almost everybody has a continuing option as long as the surviving spouse is still alive. So in those cases, we're doing the proration only to turn around and pay the exact same amount back to the person. So once again, I don't think we want to make this about it being there are many reasons for it. Administration of it is one. Whether or not it's a cost, another. I think council's point that the fact that the retirees have earned the service already is another important point. And we will bring since you're going to have this discussion again at the full board, we'll bring the statistics on the Searles to that discussion too and share that at that.
Is there any the existing rules like when the families need to report a death, or how
Yes.
how do we manage?
We typically request that they report as soon as possible. We also run the reports. We have a vendor who provides the reports on retirees, and they do the search through Social Security and vital statistics.
Oh, okay, so there is a mechanism.
Yes, but we do not pay out the death benefit, which is a lump sum of $5,000 until we receive the death certificate.
I'm glad to see this simplification. This is a very stressful time for the retirees' family, and to have all this stuff go on at the same time about, 2 days this way or that way and $50 or whatever is, it's not, I've experienced this myself, not with MSERA, but with another retirement plan when my spouse passed, and I'm glad to see this. And
Enhanced. Right.
any further comments? Right. Do we have a motion?
I move to recommend to the full board to adopt the payment of retiree benefit during months of death policy.
Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Or all in favor, raise your right hand.
Chair,
No.
the motion to recommend that the board adopt the payment of retirement benefits during month of death policy passes unanimously 4-0.
Those are 4 great new ones. Thank you.
Yes. All right, now moving on to the bylaws here. This is.
Okay, so this is something that the bylaws have not been brought to you for a number of years. And so this is the first time since before 2010 that we brought the bylaws to you for review. And we are bringing them today primarily because of the deletion of the disability information. And that's really the majority of the changes that you will see within the bylaws. There are technical changes in that we have also eliminated any reference to county clerk, and it's now just registrar of voters. So that's just a modernization provisions that we've put in. The other section, though, where we've made some changes because of how under policy, how you were doing things is in the section dealing with elections. a number of years ago, we adopted some changes to the elections to provide more time, in particular for the retiree elections, to give an additional wink. And so the timing of what we had in the policy and what you got in the bylaws were different. So we are proposing to make sure to update the election section also. Other than that, the deletion of the disability provisions and the modification to the election provisions, those are the only changes to the bylaws. Now, the important thing, once again, here is that if you make a motion to recommend that the board adopt the changes to the bylaws, we will then need to work with the county board of supervisors to get this on their agenda so they can also then approve the changes to the bylaws. So this is, even after the board if the board takes action, there will be an additional step for us to get these changes taken care of and adopted.
Just, agreed. And then to note a couple of cleanup items on the membership of this board. This is the section 102. Many years ago, the Board of Retirement decided to have an alternate retiree member, so Trustee Jones's position. And that's authorized by Searle, that the Board of Retirement would make that decision rather than the Board of Supervisors. But it's under a different statute of Searle, so we corrected that in section 102 to reference the correct section. And then the board or the committee previously considered and is recommending to the board the adoption of the electronic signatures policy. That's one where the Searle says there are certain provisions that you may have in your regulations. This is a regulation, the bylaws, and that's one of them. And so this is a belt and suspenders to make sure that we're following the plain language of Searle on that by including the electronic signatures policy reference and authority within something that the Board of Supervisors adopts.
Okay, good. Any questions or comments?
Just a curiosity question, when it goes to the Board of Supervisors, does it usually goes on consent?
We will need to work that out. They haven't seen this in
Okay.
in a while, and so we'll need to work that. That'll be one of the questions we work out with them. That's where I think the comment by council earlier is whether or not this is viewed as ministerial comes into play. So we'll work with county council on what we think the best way to get that accomplished. Ideally, I think that would be our preference, but we want to work that out with the county.
Okay.
So you move. So I move to recommend to the full board to adopt the changes to the bylaws as presented in this meeting.
Do we have a second?
Oh, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? You all in favor, raise your hand.
Chair, the motion to recommend that the board adopt the changes to the bylaws passes unanimously 4-0.
Okay, now moving on to policies we already have. And we do the standard review of them with a couple of updates to them. We do these one by one.
You will do them one by one because we have proposed changes to each one of them. So the first will be 5A on the agenda, which is the conflict of interest code. And if we go to, Chris, if you can go to attachment D of that, which is page 8 of that policy, we can focus on the one change. So the substantive change to this policy is to add the new language that was created from the law that was passed that said any public body that manages public investments has to file directly with the FPPC. And we'll call it, we've made that change. And so what we've done is to just insert that language into who are the category 1 filers. So it's clear those category 1 filers have to file directly through the FPPC. That is the only change. And that's to once again just align things with the law.
And also to note, there's a new law that actually isn't effective until January 1st, 2027. But it, unlike right now, where investments exclude digital financial assets, as of January 1st, 2027, investments will include digital financial assets. So in your Form 700s, starting January 1st, 2027, if you own any cryptocurrency, for example, that has to be included.
Okay, any discussion, questions? We have a motion.
Okay. So I move to recommend to the board to adopt the changes in the standard conflict of interest code policy.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Cooper. Any further discussion? We will have a vote. All in favor, raise your hand.
Chair, the motion to adopt the changes to the conflict of interest code policy passed unanimously, 4-0.
Okay, the next policy is our actuarial funding policy.
So this policy is reviewed on an annual basis. The one change that we will make each year until it winds down is on page 2 of the policy in the section that deals with the unfunded actuarial liability amortization. As you'll recall, you have amortization schedules for the regular unfunded liability, and then that portion that was attributable to the 2008-2009 losses. Each year that goes by, those get reduced by 1 year. They're in this policy, so we need to reduce the policy by 1 year. So the changes are just saying that from last year, it was 6 years till remaining on the UAL. This year, it's 5 years. And for the extraordinary, it's now down to only 3 years remaining on the extraordinary loss. So that's it, just to line up. This language lines up exactly with what's in your actuarial valuation report.
Okay, any questions, comments, motions?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the board actuarial.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, the motion to recommend the board adopt the changes to actuarial funding policy passed unanimously 4-0.
Okay, now we're moving on to the next one, which is our policy regarding adoption of actuarial economic assumptions.
Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the economic assumptions. So that's the first thing, is they all remain the same, but this is the same as the prior policy, as this policy includes the effective date of these. And the effective date is now, and now that you've adopted the 2025 valuation, it needs to be changed to 2025 from 2024. That's what's in Appendix A at the very top. So the effective date is now June 30th, or what we're proposing is the effective date is June 30th, 2025, and then all the assumptions are the same.
Those policies expire? I mean, you meant earlier you said that it still remain in effect until it's gone. I mean, is it
No, I didn't
replaced?
say until it's gone. They are in effect for the evaluation that you conduct.
The period of the value.
Right.
Oh,
So-
okay.
So you can change your economic assumptions. And if you were to, that the actuary uses, the board controls that. So if you were to change those economic assumptions, then we would change them in this policy also. But unless you change them, they all just stay the same year over year over year. There is no change to it. So it's just changing the date from 2024 to 2025.
Yeah.
Just one thing that may not be obvious since you're newer to this committee, Trustee Hoey, is that this is unlike the other policies where it's an annual review. Most of your policies are are reviewed every 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So this will come back every year, just
Because it has that.
because you have an annual valuation.
Every year you will change the date on this policy by.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
All right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, motion from Trustee Jones. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand.
Chair, the motion recommend that the board adopt the policy regarding adoption of actuarial economic changes assumptions, passes unanimously 4-0.
Okay, and then moving on to the next one, which is our portable electronic device policy.
Okay, staff is going to propose one change. It's on page 3 of this policy. So Chris, if you could go to that page, please. And this section talks about the fact that devices have been assigned the security, and that the board members need to follow certain guidelines if there are any suspected security violations. And there are 2 guidelines. The first one is currently says any lost or stolen portable electronic equipment or data. And the second is any attempted or actual unauthorized use. I am proposing that under number 1, it say any actual or suspected loss or suspected stolen equipment of data. And I'm proposing that because I think right now it could be read that you actually have to lose your device before you would report it to me. And I think if your device, if you think it has been out of your control or it is missing, even if we recover it at a later time, we want you to report that as soon as the suspected out of your control happens.
Makes sense.
Yes.
And that's it. That's the one change.
Okay.
Okay, any questions, comments, motions?
I'll move to recommend it.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Further discussion? Let's proceed to a vote. All in favor, raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, the motion to recommend the board adopt a change to the portable electronic device policy passes unanimously 4-0.
Okay, now moving on to the next group, we have 2 policies where which we're reviewing, and at least so far, no suggested changes to them.
So yes, staff has no recommend, these policies are coming up because they are on their regular review schedule, but we have no proposed changes. So unless the committee has changes they want to propose, in the past, you have taken these as one motion, and you could do that here. That the motion is that item 6A and B be recommended to the board with no change.
And one of these policies is our proxy voting policy. There, so
So those are here because they're scheduled to be reviewed.
Because they are scheduled to be reviewed by this committee.
And even if they don't have any change in, they still actionable. We still need to.
Correct.
yeah, so
Because you're still recommending to the board that there are no changes to the policies.
and we should all be aware of them, as it were, so that they're not just hidden. We have to look at them.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to propose to the board, recommend to the board, 2 existing policies, the felony forfeiture law policy, and the proxy voting and corporate governance policy with standard review, no change.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. In favor, raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, the motion to recommend to the board that the policy regarding implementation of felony forfeitures and the proxy voting and corporate governance policies go to the board with no changes passes unanimously 4-0.
Okay, and with that, we come to the next item of our agenda, which is any items to put on a future meeting agenda. Any suggestions? Seeing none, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Next committee meeting,
The
consider.
next committee meeting will be in October. Don't have the dates, typically about the same time in October,
This is twice a year for.
twice a year for this committee.
And every time okay, so the voting is like
20.
2 quarters.
Yes,
Okay.
so October 21st is the next meeting.
And we'll review the proxy voting reports
For the
them.
two entry.
right?
And-
And then also any policies that are also up on their regular review will come back, or any new policies that we want to bring to you will come forward.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.